Welcome to Beat Around the Barn. I am in love with today's episode because we talk about starting a sanctuary. And we've obviously just started Hogs and Kisses Sanctuary. And, you know, we're two Miami girls coming out to the country, really not knowing what we were getting ourselves into. We just knew we were passionate and we were going to go for it. So luckily, we found a bunch of amazing resources that we're going to be sharing with you.
Yeah, so we hung up our stilettos and we got mud boots instead. And we had these romantic notions that we were going to be frolicking in the pasture with the pigs and, you know, some cows and all this kind of thing. And all of that is lovely. But really, honestly, the thing we have learned is sanctuary work is seriously hard. So if you are considering starting a sanctuary, please listen to these upcoming interviews. We start off actually with Jill Tedeschi from Healthy Herd Consulting. Jill is somebody actually that Hogs and Kisses contracted with because, again, the learning curve was so steep and we wanted to make sure we did this very responsibly and thought through exactly from our needs what was needed to start the sanctuary. So we have Jill as one of the interviews. Also to Lenore Braford from Piedmont Animal Refuge. It's called The Refuge, they refer to it as. And they are getting known for animal-centric design, which is just so cool. Ella and I visited and sat down with Lenore, so we'll share that with you as well.
Fascinating.
It is. And some of these structures and just the thought process that went into it was so centered on what the animals need. So really great and cool for you to consider if you want to start a sanctuary. And then lastly, definitely near and dear to Hogs and Kisses' heart, we interviewed Justin Van Cleek from Micro Sanctuary Resource Center. And he and his partner started the micro sanctuary movement. And Hogs and Kisses is a micro sanctuary where we really want to just push forward this idea that you're going to help farm animals, right? It doesn't have to be the hundreds and hundreds of acres that we have in our head, but it could potentially be 3 rabbits, maybe 5 mice, right, that you rescue from a lab situation, potbelly pig or so. So there are just other options for people where maybe financially or other resources are not there for you to jump into hundreds of acres. Well, you can start a micro sanctuary. So we've got those 3 interviews. We hope you'll find it very valuable because certainly all of them were amazing resources for us.
Welcome, Jill. We're so excited on Beat Around the Barn. And, you know, we were very fortunate to come across you. Actually, it was the Open Sanctuary that recommended you to Hogs and Kisses. So I was wondering if maybe you could tell everyone a little bit about Healthy Herd Consulting, how you got started, why you wanted to start consulting people who want to start sanctuaries.
Yeah, so Healthy Herd Consulting is a relatively new official business of mine. I've been in the farmed animal sanctuary world for over 10 years now and have been unofficially consulting folks in my free time and at previous employment for about 6 years or so, and really have seen a need of folks to not feel so alone and to feel like they have a hand to be held as they walk through the challenges of sanctuary operation. Because it is anything but a walk in the park or a walk in the pasture, I guess you could say. So that was my reason for starting. I love working with people, and I've taught at farmed animal care conferences in the past, and I love getting to know folks involved in this movement, as well as help share some of the knowledge that is in my brain to folks that maybe don't have access to that too. So I started in the fall of this year, and it is a consulting service that provides, you know, general consulting as well as mentorship and coaching to not only sanctuaries and micro sanctuaries who are starting, but established sanctuaries as well, and working with the individuals as they overcome challenges in real time.
Right. Yeah. Because I was going to say, you know, we are obviously from the ground up. Ella and I from Miami have 0 farm animal experience, right? But as vegans, it's just always been a dream, right? To care for animals, do our part, so to speak. And clearly we're very passionate about it. And
I remember when Ann came to me and said, I think I've got a consultant for us. And I'm thinking in my head, do we really need a consultant? Right? I had no idea until we started talking to you how much we needed a consultant.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So you were saying that the gamut, right? So you've been working with ones even that are experienced. Like, so for us from the ground up, we obviously need a lot of help with infrastructure, right? And building and how to just get that piece started, right? Is that now kind of your typical client, or no, you're saying, yes, even experienced ones are looking for how to bump up their game?
Yeah, so it's actually mostly experienced sanctuaries because this job is anything but easy. So I know sometimes when we would talk, it'd be like, oh, like, what's the answer? There's never any clear answer. I know we've talked about there's like more than one way to peel the potato. But aside from the logistical aspect, which is more the support that sanctuaries and micro sanctuaries who are starting out need about, like, what is this sort of like appropriate space for a barn?
Right.
Who should I be talking to about like how to make sure it doesn't flood? How many residents should I start out with? And then also like the big part that we go through is like talking them down of like smaller, start smaller, start smaller. So you have that in the beginning, but then with folks that are really well established, both small and large, there is so many challenges that you have to overcome. You have aging populations, you have a veterinary medicine field who doesn't necessarily have all of the answers. And then you have the emotional aspect of this job and the toll that it takes on the humans there. And so it's a really high stress, high stakes job. Even if it's just, you know, yourself and a couple of folks, but if then if you throw into that you're managing a team and everyone's sort of dealing with compassion fatigue and burnout and unrealistic expectations and heartache, to really have somebody to, again, like not necessarily hold their hand, but to either be like, you're not alone, I've been there, here's some things that have helped me in the past, like you're doing a great job. So I'd actually say the folks that have been around for a while are who also need just as much support as folks starting out.
Sure, I can imagine it's like they want to bounce ideas off as well, right? Yeah, I could totally see that. And actually, funny enough, I had watched one documentary on different sanctuaries, highlighting them, and I think even I had heard that certain established sanctuaries were pretty vocal about telling other people, don't do it, like don't start a sanctuary, you know? And it's like, oh, whoa, wait a minute, what? But yet, obviously, those sanctuaries love the animals they have, but it was just the experiences they had that said, no way, you know? What would you say are, you know, the biggest motivations for people wanting to start a sanctuary? And are there those cases where you might say, listen, I don't know that you should do this? You know, like, have you yet had those conversations?
Yeah, so I haven't had to tell anybody, like, don't actually do it. At least not in my official, once they get to me, they're usually like already foot is on the gas and it's really hard to stop. But yeah, usually the motivations are exactly what you and Ella were saying. Everyone just wants to help. If you're able to have a parcel of land, or I know you're talking with the Micro Sanctuary Resource Center, or if you're able just to provide like a couple chickens, like a high quality home, everyone just wants to do their part. And I firmly believe that everyone in the sanctuary movement starts out with such a kind heart, and like still not starts out, has a kind heart, and they just want to help. And it's the challenges that come after that. So you go in with doe eyes, excited to help, and then all of a sudden the floodgates open and requests start coming in and animals are dropped off on your place, and it just seems insurmountable. So again, that's sort of where I come in through to sort of help you sort through the muck and figure out what are the next steps there. But everyone starts because everyone just wants to help. And of course, I think a lot of us maybe are a little introverted and like spending time with animals rather than people.
Yes.
Me too.
It's so funny. Yeah, Ella and I talk about this all the time because I'm quite an extrovert, but I absolutely love animals, like, right to my soul. So Ella and I have been talking a lot about how the girls who are wanting to make an appearance here, it looks like. So this is Dolly and this is Grace. It's like, you know, the other day our barn flooded, right? You know, kind of thing. But then when you get like, okay, that happens and you're dealing with it and whatever. And then the very next moment, the girls, you know, the animals do something that's so endearing. It's simple in their world probably, but for us, like, you know, like one of our pigs was carrying like a vine, but she was so proud that she had that vine in her
Decorate
mouth.
that bed. Yeah.
Yes, and that like they choose to actually sleep in the barn at night. They have this lovely tree that they go and they spend time under, but they love being in there, and we start to learn their personalities, and just it just makes it so worth it, even though there are all of these other stressors, you know?
Yes, definitely. I've talked with folks unofficially before they've gotten to consulting where they're like, I think I want to start one. And then I start laying in some, not necessarily horror stories, but some things to give them a little bit of a reality check that it's not picking, you know, wildflowers and wearing a flower crown. It is like serious work. Like what's going to happen when Dolly or one of the other ladies, like what happens if you have an 800-pound large breed pig who, you know, has a spinal injury and they can't walk? Like who's going to help you get them on a trailer? How are you going to have the skills? How are you emotionally going to deal with that? Do you have the vet contacts? Do you have medications involved? There's so much there then rather than just sort of like picking a parcel of land that's cheap. I mean, like, all right, here, let's go here. It's okay. If you want to start this stream, what are all of the factors that you need to think about beforehand? What is going to be my, you know, my income supplies? What are donations going to be like? How much space do I need? What is my max number? And what really can't I go over? Who's going to help me? Is it just volunteers? Is it going to be staff? Who's going to help me with the board? There's there's so much to consider. And then everything like all weather conditions. And it usually, you know, when it rains, it pours in terms of animal issues too. And if you start out young and everyone sort of hits middle adulthood at the same age and starts seeing some issues at the same time, you may think like, oh, I've had, you know, a couple of cows for 3 years. Everything's going pretty good. Let me keep adding. Or in the first 2 years, but then everyone hits, you know, you're going to have a population that is, you know, mid-20s or, you know, hopefully 30s, and they're all going through issues at the same time. How can you support that? How can you have the foresight to think that far in advance?
Yeah, absolutely. So like what happens, Jill, when somebody comes to you and stumps you, right? Then like, what do you do? Like how, you know, I mean, I definitely know, having signed up for various Facebook groups and just the community, and the community of sanctuaries are really good about sharing like, hey, what do you do about this chicken? Or what do you know, they're very good about that. So is that kind of what you do too, to recruit if there's like a really crazy question or a crazy situation?
Do you have an example too?
Oh yeah, exactly.
I'd love to hear an example.
Yeah, I was like, I can't, I'll try to think of an example, but absolutely. People ask me questions all the time that I have to either say, you know, I'm not a licensed veterinary professional. I can't give you dosage information. I can't tell you what's the right answer. Like one example, because there's nuances to everything. So someone was asking me, you know, we're thinking about leaving our sheep and our goats outside overnight. Do you think that that's okay? And so being like, well, what's the temperature outside? What's going to happen to their smaller area immediately outside? Is it grass? If it's grass, is it going to be filled up with parasites? So there's a lot of times there's not one concrete answer. And so I just try to help pick apart, if I don't have the true answer, things to ask of that, or to ask, you know, like you said, the sanctuary community, we're doing more and more knowledge sharing all of the time. And so it's amazing to throw it back. Like, I was talking about a chicken issue with someone, and I threw it back and like, you should definitely reach out. You know, I know you attended the chicken webinar with Patrice Vine. Like, you should follow up with Patrice definitely about that. Like, I don't have all the answers. No one person has all of the answers, and a rising tide lifts all boats. We're only going to get to know more as we start sharing more information through long-term sanctuaries, folks that have been doing this a while, and wonderful resources like Open Sanctuary Project.
Yes. I got their animal care checklist book. So I highly recommend anybody who's wanting to start a sanctuary do that. I love Open Sanctuaries resources for sure. Yeah. So like, I was just, you know, as you were saying that, I'm thinking it through a bit, because, you know, as we get to these situations of like not knowing, sometimes I don't know, I'll speak for myself. I don't know about you too, Ella, but like coming into it, I had certain notions that I think were buried in my idea of farming that is very different from sanctuary work, right? Because we're actually taking in animals as a reaction to, right, factory farming and or abuse, neglect cases. Like, so for instance, with our buns, I was thinking, oh, I'm just going to get a hutch, you know, kind of thing. But actually, they really need a lot more space to run around and jump, but jump safely, not too high, you know, and the ground has to be a certain kind of, you know, material or grass or whatever, or straw, you know. So, you know, that's also another thing too, is like, do you take in some of the information from the farming community or not? We really are just a completely different approach.
Yeah, I think you have to balance them both. So I love how, I'll shout out them again, like I love how on Open Sanctuary, when they list their resources, it'll tell you specifically if it's coming from a non-compassionate source. So you can guess for yourself, or, you know, make your own judgments about what feels right to you, or this is a recommendation, but this is coming, you know, all we have is information from agricultural resources. So we don't necessarily know how that applies in sanctuary care. So I think it's a little bit of both. I know you're speaking with Lenore, who's awesome about thinking outside of the box in terms of what a farm looks like and what a barn should be, and sort of cracking the lid on that. So I think that there's, and same goes with Justin from Micro Sanctuary Resource Center, you know, chickens can live in a house. That doesn't necessarily look like what you see on farms too. So there's so many things that we don't know what we don't know. All the possibilities that come to our mind are just possibilities that already exist. And the majority of what possibilities exist are agricultural practices.
Yes, right.
I have a tough question for you, if you don't mind, to throw it out there. I think I hear some people who would say, well, wouldn't it be better to have just a home, even if it's not the best, for animals that otherwise would have nothing? What would you say to that? If that makes sense. Did I say that well?
Sure.
No. Yeah, it does. I think people have a lot of varying opinions on there, and I think getting any individual outside of a, you know, commercial or agricultural practice, you know, that is great. However, I lean more on the side of, if you can't care for them like they are a human, you know, offspring, if you can't care for them like you care for cats and dogs, that they shouldn't be a part of your family. If they have a health issue and you cannot pay for, you know, their care, that necessarily isn't that wouldn't be okay if that was your child. That wouldn't be okay if that was your dog per se. But some folks be like, well, it's okay, at least they're not in that situation. And unfortunately, we've had so many sanctuaries, like great sanctuaries, that close and actually did turn out to be conditions similar to, you know, neglect cases, cruelty cases, because they don't say no, or they've just placed, or so there needs to be some sort of checks and balance system. And that goes back to, how do you set up the sanctuary? How do you prevent yourself from going a little bit bonkers in this situation and spreading yourself so thin that not everything gets done? So that's another thing that I sort of do for folks, is sort of like keep them in check, not in like a negative way, but in a way of like, all right, like, are we doing this? Like, oh no, okay, let's make sure to do this. Like, does the founder know that we definitely cannot rescue any more animals? How can we have that conversation, because the staff is maxed out right now?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So actually, Jill, I had you on my shoulder, okay, not too long ago. There was a situation of these 3 little male potbelly pigs, but they were piglets, really young. And oh my God, they were so cute, right? And we were like, oh my God, we gotta. And then I was like, oh my God, okay. So we've just now run to the end of our budget, right? Like, we have enough for feed and we have enough for like those kinds of, you know, like ongoing for the year, right? But we're now raising money to build our bunny barn. And so I'm like, we really don't know what comes along with a piglet, like 3 of them, much less. Plus we've got gigantor girls that are 700 pounds. So while I know that the barn we could accommodate, because we have like a separate section that was great when we designed it, you know, with your help. But like, it was so hard to say no. And thank God somebody else stepped in and said they'd take them. But literally, Ella and I were screaming obscenities because we wanted to say yes and we couldn't say yes, and we just kept screaming obscenities.
Your name,
Yes.
your name came up so many times. Anne was like, Jill, no, Jill said, absolutely not.
Yeah, no, you should. Knowing you guys, you should like love you, but you shouldn't do it. Like that ISO space needs to stay open for if like Dolly or Imposter or any of the girls like have an issue, they need to heal. If you have extra space, if you have a little bit extra time, if you have a little bit of extra like help, and if you have extra money, you're doing good. Like you shouldn't be stretched thin. It's always a red flag for me when I'm seeing sanctuaries be like, I think of course, you know, animal issues are wonderful fundraising opportunities, but like I need this amount of money to keep the animals fed, you know, this month. It's like, oh no, like why wasn't that planned for? That's a pretty basic expense. Like,
yeah. Absolutely, it does. It really, because when you're thinking money, it's now you're thinking your heart, your head, your commitment to the passion that you want to, you know, be in the world. I mean, like there's so many things that come into how you spend that dollar, you know, when you're running a sanctuary. So it's just not an easy call.
No.
Yeah.
So it's good that you guys have each other, and that way you can bounce. Someone can be, you know, the angel. Someone can be the devil.
I'm the devil in this situation.
No, you're not. I don't know if we are the right, because I was like,
we were close.
Yeah,
we were
I don't think we are good, Jill.
We were
we
so
need
close, and then exactly.
For the record, you were not ready for any more pigs.
Right. That was the thing. It was like no.
Jill said no.
Yeah. So anyhow, we're really, I mean, so having that reality check, all the more reason. I can't sing your praises enough for that, just because it is stuff like you were saying, we don't know, you know what I mean? And again, we are people with zero animal experience learning this, like drinking from the fire hose, right? You know, so having you and that, you know, voice of reason and experience is just so valuable.
Great. Yeah. I'm glad it's helped.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Yeah. So we are planning on making sure we interview also, like you had mentioned, Lenore at Piedmont, and also Justin, to have some different points of view, because definitely with Piedmont, it's a real big question about how to design your sanctuary. They have been really going down that animal centric design, right? And that was something Lenore and I were talking about, you know, the difference between maybe even protection or you know, safety versus freedom, right? Because there are some sanctuaries where the pigs roam out and, you know, into the woods and this kind of thing. Maybe there's ultimately a fence, but we decided to go with more of a pasture barn, more safety route, as opposed to say full out freedom, right? You know, and it's just so, it's like you said, like no right or wrong answer.
Absolutely. And every sanctuary, every location has its own nuances and differences. So where you're at, where there's potentially bears in the wood, it's like, oh yeah, makes sense. You know, let's not do that.
Right, exactly. Though I'll tell you, I think our girls are bigger than the bear. That's up that mountain. I just don't see that bear coming around. Well, awesome. Anyway, thank you so much, Jill. And we absolutely in the show notes, we'll put all the links to your website and such. Is there anywhere else that you'd like people to find you? Are you on social media and all that as well?
Yeah, you're welcome. It's been great talking to you guys again. Yeah, you can find me at healthyherdconsulting.com, or my email is just my first name, Jill, at healthyherdconsulting.com. I recommend signing up for my newsletter. That's where I usually do a big brain dump of some important themes that I'm reading or hearing about from my various clients. I am on Instagram too at Healthy Herd Consulting, but it's not my preferred medium. I'm not the best at posting.
Awesome. Well, you know, we will be talking to you soon, because I actually have a list of questions that I'm saving up, and then we'll come to you when we want to chat about it.
Sounds good. I'll talk to you guys later.
Awesome. Bye, Jill. Thank you.
Bye.
Hi, and welcome Lenore from Piedmont Farm Animal Refuge, or the Refuge. Lenore, as you know, we at Hogs and Kisses have just started, and so with starting a sanctuary, we always want to have experience and community around us, resources to learn. We worked with Jill from Healthy Herd Consulting, which you all already met. And we have now the opportunity to meet with you all. We had a tour here at Piedmont, or excuse me, at the Refuge. And what we really, really love is learning about how the sanctuaries are unique. So I was thinking maybe you could start off with just the backstory, right, of the Refuge, how you started and so forth. But then I'd really love to get to what I think that the sanctuary community is coming to know the Refuge for, which is animal-centric design of sanctuaries. This topic is super important because we are building our bunny barn and we're thinking about making it animal-centric. So anyhow, would you please start with that and share just kind of backstory, how you started, what year, how many animals you have, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for coming out. It's been a pleasure to have you guys to the Refuge and show you around. And I'm really happy to be talking about the Refuge today for all of you guys. We started in 2012, and we started with no property. We actually formed our board of directors. That's the first thing we did, applied for a 501c3, and kind of went about it in a very methodical way. Not always the way every sanctuary starts. Everybody is a little bit different. But for us, we were on the search for the perfect property, and it took us a little bit under a year to find it. We wanted a nice mix of woods and pasture for the animals and their needs. And so
You said we, and who is we?
yeah, so we is myself and our team. So our board of directors at the time was helping with the land search as well. And then there's a lot of people that have been involved from the beginning, including my partner Paul, who has a full-time job otherwise, but lends his time and expertise and skill set to the Refuge, which has been really important and wonderful for me to have that support as well, and to kind of go along in the journey with this together. So yeah, we started taking our first animals in 2014. We started with chickens and turkeys, and now we have about 120 rescued farmed animals. We're working on cows to be coming to the Refuge later this year, which we're super excited about. And we just acquired an additional 25 acres, bringing our sanctuary up to 45 acres total, which is going to give us so much ability to expand and grow.
Yeah, so fantastic. By the way, I think we're going to end up leaning on you a bit, or checking with you about what you decide for your cattle and your cows. Being that will be the next animal that we'll welcome to Hogs and Kisses would be cows. Amazing. Okay, so how did this whole animal-centric design focus come about for you all? Is it literally just the love of the animal and you sit there and go, gosh, I want to do what's best for them? Or is it that it was your partner Paul's background help influence that? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so I think both. I think, hopefully anybody starting a sanctuary wants to do the best that they can by those animals and create the best environment, the best life for them, especially considering where many of these animals originally come from, the factory farming food industry. So there's always that intention. The fact that Paul had the skill set to know how to build, and also was in school to learn to be an architect, to get his master's in architecture, came in naturally as this is maybe an area we could focus a little bit more on and think about what options are there that currently exist, and then what could it be, and just kind of thinking through all those things.
Absolutely.
So, what is animal-centered design, as we call it? It's trying to think about the ancestry, of course, the needs and the wants of the individual animals, but also looking at what are their natural preferences, what do they like to, how do they spend their day, what do they like to do, and putting all of that together to hopefully build something that they would build themselves if they could with their little hooves and their little feet. And of course, we don't know the answer to, we're not saying this structure is the way to build a goat house. But what we're trying to do, instead of take the original model for farm sanctuaries, which are sort of traditional barns and farms.
Right.
When people think of a farm, they think of, back 100 years ago, the little red barn out in the pasture. That's not what farming is anymore, but that's what people think of.
Right.
And that's often, what farm sanctuaries had to model off of. It's like, well, we need to get back to more space for the animals. So instead of coming at it from an agricultural perspective, and, in your brain, when you think of what is a barn, everybody has that image that comes to your head. Instead, starting from who are we serving?
Right.
So if we're talking about ducks, okay, let's learn everything we can about ducks. Let's learn about their lineage, where are they from, how were they domesticated, where were they originally living, what kind of habitat were they in, and also observing. That's a big part of the design process that Paul goes through, as well as myself, is observing these animals in different spaces. So going to see ducks at sanctuaries. How do they break up their day? Do they have a pattern? Where do they tend to hang out? What are they trying to do that they can't do? Which sometimes we have to put limitations on animals at sanctuaries for their own safety.
Yes.
And also observing them, in the wild, there were opportunities with the ducks for us to go to some local parks and even watch the native wild ducks and see, were their behaviors different than the ones that are domesticated that we're going to be caring for? What similarities were there? And then taking all of that information and putting that into your design process.
Right. So it's calling up for me a question. So my previous career I was in education, right? So when they create, how do you teach, or what do you teach to kids? There's like a curriculum, right? But yet every kid is so different, right? So now you have to individualize that instruction for the child, for the student. So do you do that in this kind of sense too, right? Conceptually. So let's say you took in a couple of chickens, and then you go, okay, I got these chickens, and now I have some kind of coop structure or some aviary structure, right? Then you go, well, I'm going to watch them a little bit. Okay, now I got to build something new. Is that the, like concretely, how would, if somebody wanting to start a sanctuary but really interested in animal-centric design, how would they go about that?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. Not only are the species of animals so different from each other and have different needs, but also wants. Individually, animals can be very different from each other.
Exactly.
Right. And practically, how do you deal with that? For us, what we're trying to say with the work that we're doing is not that you have to be an architect or do all these crazy things, or like, oh no, Ophelia the chicken doesn't like this bush as much, I better go plant a whole nother one. But to do the best that you can with what you have. So it could be something as simple as, I'm caring for chickens, and I've learned that chickens are native to the rainforest. They descend from jungle birds. So I have an open grass area for my birds. What can I do in this scenario to make it a little bit better? So whether that's just planting a few blueberry bushes, that is a way to engage in animal-centered design. And I think, what we struggle with as sanctuaries are when the public comes and they start to view these animals probably in an individual way for the first time, maybe meeting someone like Ethan, realizing like, oh, this goat has a name, his personality is so different than these other goats. When they are seeing that the goat house looks different than even the sheep house, this is helping to get that first seed into someone's mind who maybe not think of farm animals as individuals. To say, oh, they are really different. They do have different preferences and different things that they like. And that's sort of a starting point, right?
Great.
So I think you have to, of course, be practical. If you bring in a new animal who, you might learn things about them that you can accommodate. Like, this one loves carrots. Well, make sure that she gets carrots on a regular basis. But I think with infrastructure, what we really enjoy doing is
building something, and then of course we don't know what the animals, like we build before we rescue. So, you know, we're going to be building for cows next.
Yes.
We have this grand idea.
Yes.
We have this design. We're going to build it, and then the first cows are going to come.
Right.
And then it's this time of exploration.
Right.
How are they using the space? Are they using it in the ways that we thought they would, that we intended them to? Are they using it in new and interesting ways that help us even learn more about them, right? So it's kind of a dialogue back and forth. And at that point, you know, whether or not we decide to change some small elements of our structure, or we can share with other sanctuaries, these are things that we've learned.
Yes.
And our hope is really that over time, more and more sanctuaries are able to think a little bit more about the infrastructure and learn from each other.
Yes.
And, you know, maybe we say, well, our goat houses, you know, they're great, but we wish we did this. And somebody else can go and maybe do that instead. So yeah, I think you have to be practical with what you can do.
Exactly.
But even small things can make a big difference in terms of the animals', you know, daily lives and well-being. So.
Yeah, so you're learning all this stuff, like you're innovating this basically research almost. And how many sanctuaries would love to like hear, how are you able to spread this information when you learn it and help other sanctuaries?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something that we'd like to do more of. You know, we recently were able to get some illustrations created of the animal houses that we have here, with basically a very simple illustration diagram that points out what are the features of this structure that were specifically put in there for those species.
How cool. Yeah.
And so that's kind of a starting point. And then also just defining what is animal-centered design, what does it mean, why is it important, is kind of where we are right now. We have resources on our website about that where people are starting to inquire and, you know, contact us, and we love to have these conversations to kind of talk about like what is it, what can it be. It doesn't mean you have to necessarily start from scratch. What can you implement with where you are, with what your land is, with what your site is.
Absolutely.
But I think, you know, down the line, having, you know, more resources available, you know, I hesitate to say, like people sometimes ask us, oh, can you share the plans of your duck house? Well, one thing you learn when you're married to an architect is that architects will say, well, this was a site-specific building. And it's very true. We oriented our building a certain way because of where our north and south was. Where were our ponds? Do we even have ponds? Some places might not have that. So every situation is going to be a little different. That's not to say that certain elements could not be replicated, improved upon, and changed at other sanctuaries.
Absolutely.
So I think just, you know, I appreciate this opportunity to talk about this issue and kind of get the word out more about it, because I do think it's really important. And when we think about caring for these animals, we want them to have the happiest and healthiest life possible. And, you know, sanctuaries are all about not only surviving but thriving. And if you think about the built environment that all of us live in, whether it's our homes or the places we go to work, it has such an impact on our daily life. We might not think about it. But again, being married to an architect, you start to be like, oh yeah, I'm sitting in a cubicle with no natural light. This is why I'm feeling depressed or tired. So it actually ends up being maybe one of the most important parts of their care, because this is their home. They're going to be here forever. This is the only space they can inhabit. So what can we do with our resources, with our spaces, to make it the best possible?
Absolutely.
One of the things I was thinking, because I had never really heard of this concept, and I'm an animal person for my whole life, so it was so fascinating, and I just love what you're doing. In terms of cost, if I may ask, I was thinking, would it be more expensive, or is it just a different way of doing things?
Yeah, well, I think it really depends on what you're trying to do. You know, in our case, we bought land with nothing on it. So we had a blank slate, and, you know, if you're going to build something, it's always going to be a cost. But it's not necessarily more cost to do it in a way that considers certain factors for the animals. It's just, instead of building maybe a box-shaped barn, you're building something with these features incorporated. We have utilized volunteers to build all of our structures. So, you know, it really depends on your circumstance. Do you have a big volunteer team, you know, that can come in and help you? Are you building from scratch? Are you taking something that exists how can you modify that to make it more animal-centered and less agriculture-centered, less human-centered, right? So I think it really depends on the situation. Are you a micro-sanctuary? Do you have a backyard to work with, right? Like, what can you do with that?
Right.
You can do so many cool things, right?
Yes.
And it might just cost to hardly anything. So I think it just depends on your size and, whether or not you're building from the ground up, whether or not you're modifying, all these different factors.
Yeah.
But the idea is to start getting your mind in that framework. That is the most important thing is, and Paul and I have done a talk on this, and we even, the most people that come to our talk are not sanctuary people, but they're animal lovers, and they live with animals. So we always challenge people at the end, okay, who are some of the animals you live with? Do you have cats at home? Do you have dogs at home? Do you have fish? Right. Well, what about them? What kind of natural environments were they in? How could you even do small things in your own home to think more critically about these species and what would make them more comfortable?
Yes.
So, it could be something as like buying something that already pre-exists, or building a little hutch for your dog because they grew up living in cave environments because they're descended from wolves, just that investigation, like you were saying, that research. And I think this is true, for most of us when we're learning about farm animals, we have to unlearn things that society has taught us. And so in the process of unlearning, we can truly learn who these animals are. And I think we owe it to them to do that research and to really understand them from a biological and an ancestral level.
Yes.
And to then kind of have that as the basis for, okay, I know these things now that I didn't used to know about chickens or sheep, and how can I use that information and create a better environment for them here at my sanctuary?
Yeah, so it's such a great point, right? Because with our buns immediately, right? So our buns were rescued from a farm that was closed. It was seized down. They basically did overbreeding, and I think it was financial reasons that they closed down. So a group came in, saved all the animals, that kind of thing. Our buns went around to 3 other homes before they finally landed with us at their forever home. And and so we're trying to design this now, barn. Prior to that, it was, okay, where do they go? What do we do? How do we do? What's their home? So immediately in my head, I was like, I'm just going to go get a hutch. But, I'm going to get a hutch that has like a little place for them to, go. Anyway, I start talking to bunny people, and start doing my research. And I'm like, oh my God, that is not what they need, or what, that they actually need a place to roam and jump and a little bit of climbing, but not too much because their spines and like all this stuff, right? So I said, wow, look at that, And even though now they have a lovely, we call them their apartments, right? And before they move into their bunny home, which we're going to call the Rabbit Resort.
So cute.
Our farm is on Rabbit Valley Road, so we'll call it the Rabbit Valley Resort, right? Anyhow, one of our buns tends to like to jump more than the other, and the other one likes to dig more than the other, So we've been observing these kinds of things, or even things like bunnies are known for being so cuddly, and stuff like this. And every time I want to go to cuddle it, they don't want to be touched. Why? Because they're prey animals, and so they get afraid. And so it's really interesting. This is a very interesting point, because even though, like Ella said, we're animal people, we love animals. Ella's been, vegan for 20-something odd years. I've been vegan for a decade, so we are already there, like in that space, but yet these are things we didn't know,
That's right. And it does take effort because, I'm thinking about chickens when you're talking about the bunny hutches. Like, if you Google chicken coop, the most terrible, non-predator proof, tiny structures pop up, and people, I just buy this. And so it's like these things exist, and these ideas of what animals need are just out there that are very wrong.
Right.
So you have to filter through that. You have to know what you're doing to be able to know how to filter through that.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of it comes from the fact that, unfortunately, many of the animals that we're caring for are used for a purpose, right?
Yes.
So instead of thinking about their 100% well-being and what would make them happiest, it's like, well, yeah, we want them to be happy, but we also want it to be easy for humans. You know, we want it to be manageable. We want it to be profitable. And we got to take these considerations away.
Yes.
And just think about the animal, right? Like, I love you're talking about, well, yeah, these are prey animals. Of course, they're not going to be like all about cuddling.
That's right.
Absolutely.
It makes sense once you
once you understand that.
make that shift
right.
of, wait, this is all human centric.
Yeah.
This is supposed to be about the animals.
Exactly.
Then you start, the critical thinking, creativity, it sounds like.
Yes.
I mean,
Absolutely.
it's fascinating.
It is. It is. And I love this discussion so much. And maybe because we're in the beginning stages, right? You know, Ella, but more so because I think at the heart of it, like you said, you just want to do right by them. You want them to live the best possible life. So you go, oh, if I add that, or if I did that, oh, would that enrich their life a little bit more, you know?
Yeah, and it's so rewarding too then when you put the effort in and then you're able to see them enjoying those spaces and utilizing them, and you're even getting more feedback from them and learning more about them because of the way they're using the spaces.
Exactly.
Like, wow, like there's such an opportunity. Like, I get excited about it, you know. It is very exciting because it's almost a way of communicating, you know, through careful observation and just being mindful about, you know, instead of just, you know, throwing animals in a structure. It's like, this is what they live in. It's a barn.
Yes.
You can learn so much just by watching and learning and seeing how they might be talking to you in ways other than through their voice.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. When, you know, going out in our pasture right now with our pigs and stuff, all of the water and the water buckets and just making sure, right, they're cooled off, the mud wallows, all this. I literally in my head think maybe an hour goes by, but literally it's like 2 or 3, right? But then I start to see that what I've done is I've actually just stopped. After I've done the water, I stop and I must sit there and stare at them for a while, you know, because I am just watching like, oh, gosh, geez, oh, look at that. You know, one of our pigs was taking some vines, right, and parading it around the, you know, the pasture. And I'm like, oh, look at her, you know, look at that. Or, oh, geez, there are too many flies around her ear right now. You know, just all of those things, like just taking it all in, you know, like you said, it's a lot of data just by observing them. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any examples you can think of notions that we have, like for pigs, for example, you know, the pigsty, people, and
Pigs
they're
are dirty.
Right.
Pigs are always muddy.
Right.
Pigs do not like to be muddy all the time.
Right.
If you put them in an area where they only have mud, they will be very sad. But people don't understand that, and then they'll go to a place and they see pigs covered in mud, and they're like, "Oh, that's normal. They're happy."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, obviously chickens is a huge one because people in farming tend to put them out on the pasture if they do have outdoor areas at all, which is the antithesis of where they're comfortable. They're in a wide open area where predators can come and get them, and they are like, you know, and I often see on a lot of the small farms in our area, there'll be this, you know, these silly little chicken tractors. And they'll be mobile, so they'll be up on the wheels. And all the chickens are underneath them huddled, like not using their outdoor area.
Right.
But you know, like sanctuaries, rightly, they're like, well, that's how you keep chickens. Let me put them out there on grass. That's what I'm going to do because that's the only model that exists, right? So, you know, it's a really interesting time in animal rights and in sanctuary world. Sanctuaries are booming. And, you know, we have the opportunity to dive deeper and to do more and to constantly improve because at the core, we are here for the animals as individuals. And we that is obvious through the healthcare, you know, through the individual knowledge we have of each resident. You know, I know that Ethan loves this. I know that Todd loves that. It's evident in all areas of work at sanctuaries, but the built environment is sort of still harkening back to those agricultural days.
Absolutely.
So how can we bring that up so that it's visually representing our values and our ethics as well and improving the lives of animals?
Absolutely.
So it's a very exciting time.
It is, And so you said chickens, and then so you all have sheep. goats,
Yes.
ducks or geese, ducks and geese, chickens,
Chickens and
turkeys.
turkeys, yes.
Did we leave anything else out?
No,
Another
no.
Okay.
Cows are
but
coming.
then cows are coming,
Yes,
right?
and
Okay.
and pigs will be coming to us down the line as well.
Nice,
Yes, yes.
very good. For us, we're noticing, I don't know if you noticed this or not, but for us in Virginia, there's a lot of potbelly pigs everywhere. I mean, there's some farm pigs, but our pigs came to us from New York because their previous guardians fell in love with them and couldn't send them off to slaughter. And so these 3 sisters that, we grabbed are gigantic. They were bred for being, huge, and they are, the production pigs. But every time in Virginia, we keep getting like these messages, oh, hey, so-and-so sanctuary, they're usually potbelly pigs. Are you seeing that here in North Carolina?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The number one animal we get contacted about are roosters. Followed closely by potbelly pigs.
Okay.
And unfortunately, in both circumstances, it's primarily owner surrenders. Because people irresponsibly get these animals without understanding their zoning, without understanding the natural behaviors and needs of the animals, and oftentimes, with misinformation from breeders who just want to sell, and won't take animals back. And it's a problem. Everything, nothing is black and white. In this circumstance, we're seeing the rise of people taking in farmed animals as pets, as family members. And oftentimes, people intention, oh, well, when the chicken gets older and stops laying eggs, I'll just, slaughter them. In the interim, they fall in love with their birds, they name them, and they live there forever. So in one way, people are actually having relationships with farm animals. And realizing that they are individuals, and I think that is positive. On the other hand, we have a lot of irresponsible caregiving, unsafe environments, and then situations where people simply can't or don't want to keep them. So that's a really tough scenario for sanctuaries to be in, because the numbers of roosters, particularly, and potbelly pigs that are in need of homes is astronomical, and no sanctuary could take them all in. So it is heartbreaking to see, and I think that's where education really is a key. When people come here and to other sanctuaries, you're able to talk about, these issues. We talk about, breeders, and how if you are looking to get, a farm animal in your life, what are some places you can adopt from? Adopt, don't shop. Applies to farm animals, not just cats and dogs. We don't want to be supporting breeders. We don't want to be supporting hatcheries and these places that, in so many ways are similar to puppy mills in that they are all about profit. The animals are suffering tremendously. So education, I think, is really a key.
I agree. I agree. Well, thank you so much, Lenore. We can't thank you enough, for the tour, to meet your lovely fur family and feather family as well. And also for our own education. I know that you're a big advocate of that too, visiting other sanctuaries. So if you all are interested in starting your own sanctuary, number one thing, go visit sanctuaries, go volunteer at sanctuaries, talk to them, research by all means, because it's a really big learning. And me personally, in reaching out to so many different sanctuaries, everybody wants to share and do right by the animals. So we can't thank you enough for all the work that you do, for animal welfare, for loving your loved ones, your fur family and feather family, and then also for putting out this concept, of this animal-centric design for farmed animals, in particular. We love it, and we'll definitely be probably prodding you a bit to get some ideas as well. So thank you.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. It was great to speak to you guys, and reach out if anybody has questions about animal-centered design.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, Justin. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Beat Around the Barn. We at Hogs and Kisses are very, very excited to have you on because of how dedicated we are to the micro sanctuary movement. I think that it's definitely a newer term, I would say, maybe for people to understand. And I was hoping you would start us off with just a definition of what it is, and also to how the Micro Sanctuary Resource Center began as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, my partner actually coined the term micro sanctuary shortly after we started our sanctuary, which is Triangle Chicken Advocates. We're located in central North Carolina, and we started our sanctuary with 2 hens whom we rescued from the shelter. And the reason that we started to call ourselves a micro sanctuary at the beginning was because you know, it was just us as 2 longtime vegans who were passionate about animal rescue, taking in these 2 hens and deciding to give them sanctuary for the rest of their lives. And so, you know, for us, it felt like what we were doing was very different from the so-called sanctuaries that we knew, like Farm Sanctuary and Woodstock Sanctuary, which, you know, they look like large farms. And we were just living on 3 acres, you know, in the woods. And so we came up with the term micro sanctuary, and then we started talking about the micro sanctuary movement basically as a way to think about vegans providing sanctuary to farmed animals and other exploited species with the resources that they have right now. Because one of the things that we've encountered so often, even before we started our sanctuary, was the idea that, like, I'd love to start a sanctuary someday, like, you know, after I win the lottery or something like that. And so for everyone, yeah, no, I know it's such a common thing. And and it's understandable because, you know, the prospect of starting up a very large farm sanctuary and like a nonprofit organization and everything like that, it's a huge undertaking, and, you know, hundreds of thousands and sometimes millions of dollars. And so for a lot of people who are interested in sanctuary and caregiving, you know, they see that model and they think, well, I would love to do that, but I don't know how to get to from where I am now to where they are, you know, like with a big sanctuary. And so for us, like what micro sanctuaries do is they allow people to see themselves as doing sanctuary work, but without getting focused on, like, this is what I have to look like to be a sanctuary. So one of the things that we like to say as part of the micro sanctuary movement is that sanctuary is a state of mind. And so, like, you know, you as a vegan providing lifetime care, you're providing sanctuary. And whether or not you're doing that in your apartment or doing that on 100 acres in, you know, in the woods, it's the same thing. It's just happening on different scales. And so, you know, that's really kind of the core of the micro sanctuary is vegans using the resources that they currently have to provide lifetime care for farmed animals and other species who are typically not seen as companions. And we think that's really powerful because when animals who are typically only considered to be farmed species are treated in the same way and depicted the same way that typical so-called companion species are, like dogs and cats, it really breaks down a lot of the species barriers that people have in understanding who these animals are. And to us, that's really important for helping people to understand why it's you know, it's crucial to go vegan and why it's so harmful to use these individuals for food or other purposes, because you can really see it on an individual level, you know, when people are doing that direct caregiving like that. And so it's, yeah, I mean, you know, we haven't done things like, you know, if you have more than this many animals, you can't be a micro sanctuary. But really what we try to focus on is kind of that core idea of, you know, what lies at the heart of a micro sanctuary is, you know, someone who's vegan and who understands the importance of not exploiting animals, to use the resources that they currently have to do rescue and caregiving for farmed animals and other exploited species.
Yeah. So we love that. We love that because, you know, we love animals. We're big animal lovers and vegan as well. And this has been obviously a dream. And in your head, we talk about this a lot, like it's romanticized, right? This idea of having a sanctuary as a vegan, you know, but the reality of it are just insane. Like from the financial part of things to being responsible about the care, how you get the animals, each one is so individual. What if there's an emergency situation? I mean, there's just, right, so much. So we love the idea because Ella and I are coming from Miami. We're Miami girls that have just recently gone country, right? So it's the learning curve is so large, and so doing it in a very like systematic way and an approach that's responsible has really been helpful for us to not bite off more we can do.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, and I don't think it's something that we talk about enough generally in the sanctuary movement is kind of the concept of sustainability and the resources and commitment that's required to do this work for individuals, because like people will see like for example a potbelly pig who needs rescue and think, oh my God, I want to help them, but they don't understand that they're committing to like 15 years to care, potentially to care for this one individual. And then when you start adding more and more and more individuals, like it really adds up. So, we really emphasize that rescue and caregiving work is not a linear process. It's not like you add, one chicken, one pig, one bunny. It's really, a much more of like an exponential process. It doesn't follow like a 1 + 1 + 1 model. And so for us, like micro sanctuaries are really, can be really helpful on a sustainability level, so that people don't automatically jump into the only thing that they can do is like this big farm sanctuary with hundreds of animals, and then like a couple of years in they realize they've bitten off too much they can chew, and they have all these animals now who are going to be living for many more years. And to us, we really believe that it's important to, when you commit to provide care for an individual, like you know what you're signing up for, and you provide adequate top quality care to them for the rest of their lives. And that means understanding that every new person you take on to your sanctuary or to your micro sanctuary is going to impact the quality of care that you can give to all the other residents you already have. So we don't really like to focus on like getting people to take in on as much as they possibly can, but instead to try to think about micro sanctuaries as part of a community and trying to build a community so that more people are taking on smaller part of it, so we can rescue a lot, but not try to put all that work on 5 people in the whole movement.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Question about potbelly pigs, since you brought them up.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think some people might be wondering, what would be the difference between having a potbelly pig and considering it a pet and caring for it for the rest of their lives, and having one and having yourself be a micro sanctuary? Can you kind of distinguish between the two of those?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So, I mean, we don't some people do use potbelly pigs for food. And then of course there's all sorts of problems with like potbelly pigs being bred and sold as, basically commodities just because they're really popular. For us, it's really about like kind of the context of where those individual animals live. And so that's why, like, for me personally, like, I think it's complicated to call yourself a sanctuary if you're still continuing to exploit other animals for food and stuff like that. So like if you're non-vegan, I think, non-vegans can definitely provide safe and good homes for individual animals. But if it doesn't happen in the context of being like a part of ending exploitation as a system, I think it's really complicated to talk about sanctuary in that framework. And so so for the example of a potbelly pig, like I think like rescuing a potbelly pig as a vegan, like what I'm going to be talking about is like the way that individual's experience ties into the larger problems of animal exploitation, and this huge system of commodification that we have that turns individuals like this one pig into a commodity. And I think that it's so interesting and also really powerful to tie that sort of advocacy to the stories of these individuals whom we rescue, because so often like the veganism that we do advocacy for isn't really grounded in the lived experiences of the ones who suffer from it directly, but it's in kind of like just humans talking to other humans about why we should go vegan. And to me, like having rescued and cared for so many of these individuals coming out of these exploitative systems, like I can never be as good of an advocate as any one of the chickens at our sanctuary. Their stories are so powerful, and they shed so much light on the realities of the farming system, that just telling their stories is really like, I mean, it really touches on everything that I would want to touch on as someone just doing like strict, you know, vegan advocacy, not connected to a rescue. Yeah, and so it's really about, to me, kind of placing that individual's story in that larger framework of exploitation and the ways that we can, help illuminate why ending exploitation is so important based on their experiences and you know, in the system. And every individual story is unique, and I think has new light to shed on that. So, you know, and one of the things that I think micro sanctuaries can do really well, because we don't, you know, because there are fewer individuals to care for, is a lot of times that micro sanctuaries can do a really good job of focusing on like telling the stories and showing the lives of these individuals, like, you know, in much more detail than other places. So, yeah, if I can put a plug in, like one that we love is Boo the Roo. He's a rooster who lives in Tennessee at a micro sanctuary, and I mean, just the videos and the stories are just they're amazing. And I think micro sanctuaries can do a really good job of that, because they, you know, they can really focus on telling like extensive stories and sharing the lives of the individuals who live at those micro sanctuaries.
Absolutely. Yeah, love it, love it, love it. Yeah, because, you know, part of the reason why I knew I wanted to start a sanctuary is because of the deep relationship I had actually with my cats. Like when I just realized, I mean, I had already been vegan, but realizing there's so much more to animals than we give them credit for, you know? And then I was like, well, shoot, I want a relationship with a pig, you know, and a cow and a bunny and like, what are they like, you know? And it was just this growing love and respect for the animal as an individual. And you're right, micro sanctuaries, we can do that. We can really, they become our family. We call them our fur family or our four-legged family, you know, or maybe feathered family, right? So, okay, you spoke earlier about bridging the gap, right, for people who have in their mind that romanticized huge hundreds of acres. And then you all started Micro Sanctuary Resource Center. So speak a bit about the resources that are there and those who might want to start it as a micro sanctuary. What do you all offer? I think you have some grants on there as well, correct?
Yeah. Great. So our micro grant program is probably like the core of what MRC does right now. So we have a small grant program for both individuals and nonprofits. So even if you're not a nonprofit, you can still apply. And we have information about that on our website, microsanctuary.org, to look at eligibility requirements and everything. So we also run a number of like online like Facebook discussion groups. Our flagship is Vegans with Chickens, which my partner actually started when we rescued those two hens back in 2014. It has like, you know, like almost 6,000 members. It's international, very active, and has really been really pushing the level of care available to and given to chickens, and just sharing information and knowledge, you know, with people around the world. So we have a number of different groups like that like our admin or our board members either like admin or kind of, you know, co-admin and participate in. We also do a lot of one-on-one mentorship for people who have questions or, you know, are trying to like figure out how to get started, things like that. So we do a lot of direct mentorship, especially kind of tied in with the grants. And then we do kind of like other educational stuff, whether it be like helping to co-organize like, you know, webinars and and things like that. Yeah. And so a large part of it too is just really trying to kind of help spread the awareness of micro sanctuaries kind of as an option. And, you know, trying to kind of like tie the message of animal liberation and kind of an intersectional approach to veganism with caregiving and kind of like the, you know, the rescue side of things. So, you know, not really keeping separate like the animal rescue on one side and kind of like the activism on one side, but really seeing caregiving as a type of activism that bridges like, you know, kind of the two kind of, you know, parallel sides of veganism and really brings them together. So because, you know, I really think that, you know, animals are activists in many ways, and like helping to tell their story is a really powerful form of activism, but also doing caregiving makes us better vegan activists. You know, I know that since the day that we started doing chicken rescue, I've become a different vegan and I've become a better vegan activist. And it's really just entirely changed the way that I understand being vegan and the way that I talk about these issues. And so, You know, so I really think that, like, you know, for people who are interested to think about like that concept of like, you know, if you're interested, like, should you start a sanctuary? Like, it's definitely something that I think offers a lot of benefits and a lot of opportunities, but also, you know, it takes a lot of work as well.
Who would you tell if they asked and said, I really want to start this? Is there some criteria where you would say, absolutely not?
Yeah.
That you can think of off the top of your head.
Yeah, boy, brutal honesty is a
Yeah, I mean,
virtue.
that's great.
Yeah. I mean, I would just encourage people to think about it the same way that they would think about adopting like a dog or a cat. You know, because like for some reason, whenever someone rescues like a farmed animal, a lot of times the first thing they do is start a GoFundMe. But you don't really see that happen with like a chicken or with cats or dogs. And so yeah, so I really think like I encourage people, because like in terms of financial expenditures and time commitment and stuff like that, like if you do it properly, like any pig or any chicken is going to be the same, you know, financial and time commitment that a dog or a cat will be. And so for people who don't have a lot of experience with working with like farmed animals and things like that, the first thing I would say would be to think about it like if you were thinking about adopting a dog or a cat into your family. And do you have the time commitment and the resources to you know, commit to that individual for indefinitely, you know? Yeah. And then beyond that, like there are a lot of really good resources available for people now to start to kind of get a knowledge base around like what goes into doing caregiving. And an organization that we partner with a lot is Open Sanctuary Project. And they have tons of resources. I've actually worked with them a ton on their chicken ones. They have tons of resources on starting a sanctuary, on doing caregiving, on like everything. It's amazing resource. And so like I really encourage anyone who's not able to do direct hands-on experience like volunteering to spend lots and lots of time doing their educational resources, so you start to kind of get an understanding, you know, at least on kind of like the knowledge, like the knowledge side of things, kind of what you're signing up for.
Yeah. Are there any specific farm animals that you would say are a little like lower maintenance for people who maybe don't have as much space or as many resources? Are there some?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So chickens can do really well in like apartments and small places and like living inside. You know, there are even like chicken diapers that you can get. So chickens can actually do really, yeah, no, they're great. They're amazing. But yeah, you can like chickens can do really well inside with little diapers, and you know, kind of they're very similar to cats. It's a inside tip, but the chickens and cats are very, very similar in a lot of ways. And typically in our experience, chickens kind of have a higher rung on the hierarchy than cats do. So the cats usually defer to the chickens inside. But chickens also do have a lot of medical issues that need addressing due to like egg laying and breeding for flesh production. So they're not low maintenance, but they can do really well in like smaller like inside spaces. And you know, like, you know, if you have well, you know, if you're going to rescue someone, you should be sure that you have the resources to do the proper caregiving and like medical care. But you know, like, I mean, potbelly pigs can do really well inside as well. And so, you know, you just kind of have to know what you're signing up for in terms of like their energy level and their ability to get into things. And, you know, so, you know, I would, yeah, so I wouldn't recommend like large mammals like cows or goats or anything living inside necessarily. But also too, I would really want to encourage people to think about species like rodents and even like fishes and other aquatic species. Like these are all individuals who are suffering under the exploitation of either agriculture or the pet industry, you know, wild animal like capture and trade. And so like we really love when people take the micro sanctuary concept and apply it to like rescuing, for example, like lab rats. Or like betta fishes from stores who are dying. And, you know, so, yeah, I mean, like really, like, I really think that it's not so much about like, these are the best species that fit for micro sanctuaries, or these are like the species that micro sanctuaries do, but more like taking that approach of like, well, like, what if I saw every individual who needed help as a companion the same way that I have like dogs or cats in the past, you know? And so, and if you expand that circle to include, you know, like lab animals and aquatic species who are like really suffer, you know, like you can do an amazing micro sanctuary with a fish tank, you know. I mean, it's just, you know, it's really about kind of like that ethos of senior veganism put into practice to provide care to these exploited beings.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so good.
Can I give a little plug for the rats?
Yeah.
I love rats. I grew up and I rescued some rats from my science lab in 5th grade.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And I forced my dad to cut a hole through the house so that I could have the cage inside and they could go through the tunnel and have a cage on the outside so they get the inside. And anyway, they were phenomenal companions and they're so bright and smart. So just a plug for rats. They get a bad rap.
And also, you know, our extended mission will also be to offer some grants, right? You know, and stuff. And we really want to do one for like just the whole science using animals and that whole world, whether it be bunnies or rats or mice or whatever. So that's definitely on our radar for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's really useful too, because I mean, like, you know, anti-vivisection work has been something that animal rights activists have been doing for centuries at this point. But like one thing that we don't really do as so well is to like show survivors and talk about their experiences and ground the activism we do, not in kind of our opposition to it, but in the experiences of these individuals who suffer. And to me, like as someone who spends my entire life 24/7 doing caregiving and rescue and stuff like that, like I'm much more informed by the lived experiences of the survivors. And I think that we need to do a much better job as a movement of letting them have the spotlight. And I really think that like lab animals and, you know, and these other species are typically not even seen as individuals, even by vegans, like there's so much work to be done to show them as individuals and let their stories come to light. And to let them lead the way in terms of like the work that we do as activists, because, you know, they're amazing. I mean, they have so much, you know, knowledge to share, and they have so much, you know, illumination to provide on why we should no longer be doing the things that we do.
Yes. Well, we could not agree more. Thank you so much, Justin, for spending time with us and sharing such great information. We'll make sure that we provide all of the websites in the show notes. Any other last thoughts you'd like to leave with people about wanting to start a sanctuary?
Just do your homework and don't feel bad for being small. Small is beautiful. So
micro but mighty. That's what I've been saying. Micro but mighty.
That's great. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, please give our love to all your chickens and all your family as well. And thank you so very, very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a joy.
Wow, what a valuable episode, right?
Yeah.
And that's no matter where you are on your sanctuary journey.
Exactly, yeah. I think that's why we wanted to interview Jill, Lenore, and Justin so they could put forth information to meet you wherever you are in your sanctuary journey. They certainly have helped us, right? And at the end of the day, really what we want to have come across is that you do your research, and absolutely we recommend volunteer, because I think that firsthand experience is really what you need to see if that is the path for you. By all means, feel free to reach out to Hogs and Kisses. We're at hogsandkisses.org. We're happy to point you into all different directions. And definitely a big shout out to the Open Sanctuary Project, and that's opensanctuary.org. The resources are immense, and actually Justin, I think, brought that up too. So please do look at resources, do your research, and then also lend a hand, and believe me, you'll get it back tenfold.